actually as well. And so all the things I'm teaching you were learnt by going through these emotions, and then God's truth about these things coming to me afterwards, as emotional states, And so it was a very powerful experience. But one of the things I realised is you don't really appreciate it until you go through it yourself. It's not everything to do with the soul. You have to go through yourself.
I started to come in contact with terror, a situation when I lose my intellect, my mind. I'm just a little baby knowing nothing. And just sort of inside me screaming for someone to come and help me and sort it out. And I think I talked about this earlier time about being a fetus in my mother's stomach. So,
but see, all that to me sounds very intellectual still.
I know that when I say it, but I have started to go in. I have lived in it a lot.
Well, I question how much of that is your experience versus a spirit experience. A spirit who's causing you to feel this way. You see, for me, it wasn't like any of that. And also anybody who does this sincerely doesn't have these kind of things happen. So what I notice is that some people say that they are experiencing their own feelings, but they're still very scared of their own feelings. And so what they need is somebody else's feelings to exaggerate their own or to pacify their own feelings. And I see calm them down, make it easier to deal with. And so what I see is a lot of people, so what I recognise nowadays is a lot of people who say they're feeling their feelings are not feeling their feelings. They're feeling spirits who have had these feelings. Does that make sense? And this is the kind of thing, what you describe is the kind of thing that happens when spirits have their feelings through you. What happened to me was completely different to that. There was no consciousness of my age or my where I was, state
in your development
of whatever. Yeah, in terms of my physical development. They're just feelings. And all you do is have them.
But that is how it is when I'm there and have no.
But your desire to categorize it and analyze it, saying it's when I'm in the womb and I'm there, that's all a symptom of not wanting to surrender. It's way of managing.
It's all the symptom of not wanting to surrender.
Yeah.
And the trouble with you not wanting to surrender is that you're going to attract spirits having the feeling so that you can still feel that you had a feeling. So a lot of people, when you talk about feelings, they say, oh, now I've got to try to have feelings. And so what they then do is open themselves up to spirits having feelings through them. And this is something that happens very regularly with hypnotism, with going to a psychologist or some kind of hypnotherapist or whatever. This kind of, what you're describing is very much a hypnotist type of experience. And that's very different to having your own feelings. And I've learned to recognise the difference between those two states. And my experience is not the same as that. And so the key is to not worry about that, but just go, okay, if the person who's gone through his feelings can say to me that my feelings are maybe spirit influenced, and when I say to you, I'm not saying maybe, but you would be thinking maybe. You understand the difference. Like when I say something to you, I'm saying what I know to be a truth, except when I'm saying this is my personal opinion. This is not my personal opinion. You understand?
Yes.
But you will see it as my personal opinion. You understand? This is how you see it right now, as my personal opinion. Now, even if it is just my personal opinion, you need to consider. It is something I had to consider. Once I understood, I never had a belief in the spirit world when I began this process in this life, because I didn't remember the spirit world in any way. And in fact, I preferred not to remember it. There's too much pain remembering it, You know what I mean?
Mm.
So I didn't want to remember it, and I didn't believe in it. And once I went through some feelings, I started feeling the spirit world and started understanding the spirit world better. And I also could recognize when people were being influenced in their feelings and not actually feeling their feelings.
Mm.
And the many people I see, once they hear divine truth, they start thinking they've got to feel their feelings. But frequently they still don't want to feel them, but they won't say to themselves, I don't want to. They want to tell themselves they want to. And this is you, Anna. You want to tell yourself you want to feel feelings when I still feel you don't want to feel feelings. So in that state, you are very open to other people feeling feelings through you and thinking that you are your own. Do you follow me?
I understand, yes.
Yep. And to actually get out of that place, you have to be really focused on feeling your own feelings, wanting to feel your own feelings. And to recognize that you don't want to feel your own feelings is a very powerful thing. Most of you think it's a bad thing to recognize that. After I've said these truths, you think it's a bad thing. But it's actually a very powerful thing, because you realize then that any feelings you're having while you don't want to feel are probably not your feelings, right? And it's only when you want to feel your feelings that you'll actually have your feelings, right? And it's very easy for somebody who's gone through this to tell the difference. Besides the fact that you can see spirits around you having their feelings through you and why they want to have them through you. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. But when I say these things to people in their individual circumstance, the average person says, oh, that's only his opinion. Do you understand? To themselves, because they would prefer to believe they had the feeling than they would to believe that they didn't have the feeling and they had another person's feelings. You follow me?
So because I have came in this feeling situation when I lost my mind and feel totally lost.
But where did the thought come from that it was in your mother's womb?
It's come after.
It's got to come from outside, because if you were in the actual womb, you wouldn't know you were there.
No.
Would you?
No.
No. So if you actually had a feeling that appeared in your mother's womb, you would not actually know you're there. So you would never have a thought associated that you were there. Somebody else had to tell you. And this is my suspicion. It's not my suspicion, it's an actual fact, but I'm telling you it as something you should be suspicious of.
That is a theory I have created afterwards, because when I am in the feeling, then I don't have that connection. But what my question now is next time that happens, then I know that it's a spirit affecting me. So what do I do in that situation?
Well, all you need to do is say to yourself, well, I obviously don't want to feel something.
Oh.
Only reason why a spirit would come and feel something through you is because you'd prefer to feel their feelings than your own. Oh. So that's all you got to do. It's a simple thing.
Okay.
There's many times when I see other people wanting to feel spirit's feelings rather than their own feelings, because it also confirms to them they sort of go, while I'm feeling the spirit's feeling, then it means I'm feeling something. So I feel like I'm doing something. And a lot of people just want to feel like they're doing something even when they're not. So it's like it's a very attractive way to enter into an addiction with a spirit, because that way you get to feel like you're progressing when you actually aren't. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
And a lot of times we unfool ourselves, don't we? Yeah. So you're going to be quite careful of it, but it's very easy to solve. It's not. None of these things are hard to solve. You can go, okay, I'm getting informed about my feelings here. This is weird because I haven't really had them all properly yet. So something's going on. Someone is communicating with me. And by the way, it won't be God, because God knows that when you feel, after you've felt your feelings, you will then know what's going on. Not during and not immediately after either. Like I said, there were many times, for me, it was 3 or 4 years after I dealt with other things that I knew what was going on. So don't expect to know what's going on within a moment. If that happens, you're being told. And by the way, no divine love spirit would do that to you. So it's indicative of the fact that the spirit who's doing it is not, on God's way. And you don't have to stress about it. You just need to go, well, obviously I don't want to feel something here, so what is it I don't want to feel? Yeah? Yeah. Now, many times I will state to you things that I know to be a certainty, but I'll state it to you as if it's something you need to consider. Right? The reason why I do that is because I'm gentle with you and I let you have your own decisions. But if you ask me, do I believe it's true? I'll say, no, I don't believe it's true. I know it's true. You know, if I believe something to be true and I didn't know it, I wouldn't share it with you nowadays. Unless you said to me, what do you believe? And I go, oh, this is what I believe. But don't live on it because I don't know, is what I would say. So when you guys asked me about earth change events, I said, well, I believe these things might happen, but I don't know. I didn't present them to you as a truth. Does that make sense?
Yes.
But some of the things I do present to you as a truth, I know to be such. When I say all the things I present to you as a truth, I know to be such.
I think it's, perhaps I'm lying to myself now also, but I do think it's valuable to hear that this experience is not me, because then I can
well, see, this is where you've got to take care, Anna. Let's say I was somebody else and I'm suggesting to you this thing, and let's say I don't know. If you are just going to just take it at face value without experimenting, then that would not be good for you.
No.
So I want to show you how God wants to talk to you. What God does is God's got you in his hand, right? But God's presenting truth to you, but he's not saying to you, Anna, you have to accept this truth now.
No.
He never does that.
No.
What God does is this. He says, here's the truth, Anna, but I want you to experiment with it. Because if you experiment with it, in the experiment, you will end up going through an experience that confirms the truth in your heart to you. Do you understand?
I do.
Now, this is very different than somebody saying, here's the truth, you just got to accept it, isn't it?
Yes.
God never does that with you. What God's doing is God's saying, here's the truth, Anna. If you experiment with this truth, and this is how I've learnt every single truth I've ever learnt, the first century and now, by the way. So I'm describing to you actually a message that John wrote in the Padgett Messages, because I told John this is how I experienced everything, and he wrote it down. But this is how I experienced everything in the first century and everything now. God presents a theory, a fact to me, but God presents it as experiment with this. He doesn't present it as you got to experiment with this. Or else. Do you understand?
Yes.
He says, experiment with this, see how it works out. And because if I'm humble enough, I will experiment with it. In the experiment, I will find the confirmation of the truth. Now, because it's a personal experience that I've actually had myself, it now can be confirmed as a truth. Does that make sense to you? And the reason why God does it this way is because God knows the truth can only enter you emotionally. The only way it can enter you emotionally is if you go through an experience. You follow? He can't just say, here's the truth and you will accept it. He has to be able to say, here's the truth, experiment with that. You experiment with it through your own desires and everything, you experiment with it. It gets confirmed through your experimentation. Now it's a solid truth in you. Now you know it's true. And it's not, you don't just know it because God told you. So you could take an approach, couldn't you, with God, with the conscience. You could take the approach, everything I hear in the conscience is just basically true and I've just got to accept it. That's one approach you could take. That's not the approach God's trying to have you take. The approach God's trying to have you take is, here's a truth that you hear via the conscience. Now experiment with it so that it can enter here, your heart, your soul, not just your intellect. He's saying, if you experiment with this, it will eventually enter here. But you've got to experiment with it for that to happen. It makes sense to you? Yeah. Very important thing to understand about how God shares truth. So anybody who just presents the truth to you without you having the experiment first is not a person connected to God. You understand?
I guess it's the same with it.
See you, Alison.
Thank you.
No worries.